Elena Martinez stood before the ornate mirror in her cramped studio apartment, adjusting the simple white dress she had borrowed from her roommate. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, too fine for someone like her who spent most days in worn jeans and secondhand sweaters. Tomorrow would change everything, though she wasn't sure if it would be for better or worse. The arrangement had been made 3 months ago, when her father's medical bills had spiraled beyond anything their family could manage. Carlos Martinez, once a proud construction foreman, now lay in a hospital bed fighting a rare blood disease that required treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. The experimental therapy that could save his life cost more than Elena could earn in 10 years working at the local diner. That's when Marcus Blackwood entered their lives, though not in the way fairy tales usually unfold. There were no chance meetings or romantic encounters. Instead, his lawyer had appeared at their door with a proposition that seemed too good to be true, yet desperately necessary. Marcus Blackwood, heir to the Blackwood pharmaceutical empire, needed a wife. Not for love, but for business. His grandfather's will contained an unusual clause that required Marcus to be married before his 30th birthday to inherit the company. With only 6 months remaining and a string of failed relationships behind him, Marcus had decided on a practical solution. A marriage of convenience that would satisfy the legal requirements while allowing both parties to benefit. The lawyer had explained the terms with clinical precision. Elena would receive $2 million up front, enough to cover her father's treatment and secure her family's future. In return, she would marry Marcus and maintain the appearance of a loving wife for exactly 2 years. After that, they would divorce quietly, and she would receive an additional $3 million. She could live in his mansion, have access to household staff, and want for nothing materially. The only requirement was that she play her part convincingly in public. Elena had stared at the contract for hours, her hands shaking as she read through the legal language that would bind her life to a stranger's. Her mother, Maria, had wept when Elena explained the offer. Not from joy, but from the terrible weight of knowing their daughter would sacrifice her chance at real love to save her father's life. Mija, her mother had whispered, "This is too much to ask of you." But Elena had already made her decision. She signed the papers the next day. Now, as she prepared for the wedding ceremony that would take place in exactly 18 hours, Elena tried to imagine what Marcus Blackwood would be like. She had seen his photograph in business magazines and society pages. Tall, dark-haired, with piercing blue eyes and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was undeniably handsome, but his expression in every photo seemed cold, distant. She wondered if he smiled, if he laughed, if he felt anything beyond the calculated ambition that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Their only interaction had been a brief phone call 2 weeks earlier, where he had asked if she had any allergies or dietary restrictions the staff should know about. His voice had been deep and professional, the kind of tone he might use in a board meeting. When she had tried to ask him about his expectations for their arrangement, he had simply said, "The contract covers everything necessary. My assistant will send you the wedding details." The wedding itself would be small but elegant, held at the Blackwood estate with only immediate family and a few close friends present. Elena's family would attend, though they still seemed shell-shocked by the sudden turn their lives had taken. Her younger brother Diego had been the most vocal in his opposition, calling the arrangement prostitution with a marriage license. But even he had fallen silent when their father's doctor had explained that without the experimental treatment, Carlos had perhaps 3 months to live. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sophia. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind." She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "My father is alive because of this decision. That makes it worth it." But as she set the phone down, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far more complicated than a simple business arrangement. The lawyer had mentioned that Marcus had been engaged before to a woman named Victoria Ashford from one of the old money families. The engagement had ended abruptly 6 months ago, though no one seemed willing to discuss the details. Elena had tried to research Victoria online, finding photos of a stunning blonde woman who seemed to belong in Marcus's world in a way Elena never would. Victoria appeared at charity galas and society events, always perfectly dressed, always smiling for the cameras. She was everything Elena was not. Refined, educated in the best schools, comfortable in the world of wealth and privilege. The contrast made Elena acutely aware of her own background. She had grown up in a working-class neighborhood where her mother cleaned houses to supplement her father's income. Elena herself had been working since she was 16, first babysitting neighborhood children, then waitressing, always contributing to the family's finances. She had managed 1 year of community college before her father's illness forced her to drop out and work full-time. Now she was about to become the wife of one of the most powerful men in the country, living in a world she had only seen in movies and magazines. The thought terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. Elena's phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed her mother's number. "Hija, how are you feeling?" Maria's voice carried the weight of worry that had become constant since the diagnosis. "I'm okay, Mama. Nervous, but okay. Your father wants to talk to you." There was a shuffle as the phone was passed, and then her father's voice came through, weaker than it used to be but still carrying the warmth that had defined her childhood. "Elena, my brave girl, you don't have to do this. Papa, we've talked about this. I want to do it. But a marriage without love, it's not what I wanted for you." Elena closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "Maybe love will come, or maybe I'll find something else just as valuable. But right now, having you healthy and alive is worth everything to me." There was silence on the other end, and when her father spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "You have always been stronger than the rest of us. I pray that this man will see what a treasure he's getting." After the call ended, Elena sat on her narrow bed and allowed herself a moment of genuine fear. Tomorrow she would wake up as Elena Blackwood, wife to a millionaire, mistress of a mansion with more rooms than her family's entire neighborhood. She would have servants, a driver, more money than she had ever imagined. But she would also be bound to a man who saw her as nothing more than a solution to a problem. The contract had been clear about physical expectations. The marriage would remain platonic unless both parties agreed otherwise. They would share public spaces when necessary, but maintain separate bedrooms. Elena would attend social functions as his wife, support his business endeavors, and present the image of a happy marriage. In private, they could live essentially separate lives. It seemed simple enough, but Elena suspected that nothing about Marcus Blackwood would be simple. She had heard whispers about his reputation in business. Brilliant, but ruthless. Charming when it served his purposes, but capable of destroying competitors without hesitation. He was known for getting what he wanted, regardless of the cost. What worried Elena most was that the contract said nothing about what would happen if one of them wanted more than the business arrangement they had agreed to. What if she began to have feelings for him? What if he grew tired of the pretense and wanted her gone before the 2 years were up? The legal language protected her financially, but it said nothing about protecting her heart. The next morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. Elena woke in her apartment for the last time, surrounded by the modest possessions that had defined her life until now. Her mother arrived early to help her get ready, bringing the pearl necklace that had been Elena's grandmother's. "Something borrowed," Maria said as she fastened the delicate chain around Elena's neck. "My mother wore this when she married your grandfather. She always said it brought her luck and love." Elena touched the smooth pearls, drawing comfort from the connection to generations of women who had faced uncertain futures with courage. "Tell me about them, Mama. About how they met." As Maria brushed Elena's dark hair into an elegant updo, she told the story Elena had heard countless times as a child. How Elena's grandmother had been arranged to marry a man she had never met. How she had been terrified but determined to make the best of it. How her grandfather had been equally nervous, but how they had found common ground in their shared values and eventually built a love that lasted 50 years. "Love grows in many different soils, Mija," Maria said softly. "Sometimes the strongest flowers bloom in the most unexpected places." The wedding dress had been chosen by Marcus's assistant, a sleek creation of ivory silk that fit Elena perfectly. It was beautiful but conservative, appropriate for a business arrangement disguised as a romantic union. When Elena looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The drive to the Blackwood estate took 40 minutes, winding through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until they reached the gates of what could only be described as a palace. The mansion sprawled across manicured grounds, all stone and glass and architectural confidence. Elena's family followed in a second car, their silence speaking volumes about their overwhelm at the sheer scale of wealth they were witnessing. Marcus's assistant, a crisp woman named Margaret, met them at the door and efficiently guided them through the preparations. Elena found herself in a luxurious suite being attended to by a hairstylist and makeup artist who had been hired for the occasion. They worked with professional expertise, transforming her into someone who might believably belong in this world. Through the tall windows of the bridal suite, Elena could see guests arriving. She recognized some faces from business magazines and society pages, the elite of the city coming to witness what they undoubtedly saw as a strategic alliance rather than a romantic union. Mrs. Blackwood. Margaret appeared in the doorway. Mr. Blackwood would like a word before the ceremony. Elena's heart hammered as she followed Margaret through corridors lined with priceless art and fresh flowers. They stopped outside a heavy oak door, and Margaret knocked twice before opening it. Marcus Blackwood stood by a massive window, his back to the door. Even in silhouette, he was imposing, tall, and broad-shouldered, every line of his body speaking of controlled power. When he turned, Elena felt her breath catch. The photographs hadn't captured the intensity of his presence. His blue eyes seemed to look right through her, assessing and calculating. His dark suit was perfectly tailored, emphasizing his athletic build. But it was his expression that made Elena's pulse race. Not cold as she had expected, but something far more dangerous. Interest. Genuine, undisguised interest. The wedding ceremony passed in a blur of expensive flowers, classical music, and faces Elena didn't recognize. She stood beside Marcus at an altar made of white roses and baby's breath, speaking vows that felt like lines from a script she hadn't fully memorized. His hand was warm and steady when he slipped the platinum wedding band onto her finger, the weight of it feeling heavier than the 2-carat diamond engagement ring he had given her the week before. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her cheek rather than her lips, a gesture that felt both respectful and distant. The guests applauded politely, and Elena caught sight of her parents in the front row, her mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while her father watched with a mixture of pride and concern. The reception was held in the mansion's ballroom, a space that could have housed Elena's entire childhood home twice over. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with orchids and gold accents, while a string quartet played softly in one corner. Elena found herself moving through the evening like an actress in a play, accepting congratulations from people whose names she forgot immediately after being introduced. Marcus remained beside her for most of the evening, his hand resting lightly on her back as they moved from group to group. To any observer, they appeared to be a couple comfortable with each other, but Elena was hyper-aware of the careful distance he maintained, the way his smiles never quite reached his eyes when he looked at her. "So tell me," asked Patricia Whitmore, the wife of Marcus's business partner, "how did you two meet? Marcus has been so secretive about the romance." Elena felt Marcus tense slightly beside her, and she realized this was their first real test as a couple. They had never discussed their cover story, never rehearsed the lies they would tell to make their arrangement seem believable. At a coffee shop, Elena said, surprising herself with how easily the fiction came. "I was reading, and Marcus asked about my book. We ended up talking for hours." Marcus's hand pressed slightly against her back, and when she glanced up at him, something like approval flickered in his eyes. "Elena was reading Neruda's poetry," he added smoothly. "I'd never met anyone who could discuss 20 love poems with such passion." The lie rolled off his tongue so naturally that Elena wondered if he had always been this good at deception, or if it was a skill he had developed out of necessity. Patricia smiled and moved on to safer topics, but Elena filed away the moment as evidence that her new husband was far more complex than their business arrangement suggested. As the evening wore on, Elena began to notice the undercurrents flowing through the gathered guests. There were whispers when people thought she wasn't listening, speculative glances when they thought she wasn't looking. She was clearly being evaluated, measured against some standard she didn't understand. The most intense scrutiny came from Marcus's family. His mother, Catherine Blackwood, was an elegant woman in her 60s who had the kind of understated beauty that came from excellent genetics and unlimited resources for maintenance. She had been polite but cool during their brief introduction, her gray eyes assessing Elena with the thoroughness of someone buying a racehorse. Marcus's sister, Rebecca, was more openly hostile. She had inherited her mother's looks and her father's business acumen, and she clearly saw Elena as an interloper who didn't belong in their rarefied world. During dinner, Rebecca regaled the table with stories of Marcus's ex-fiancée Victoria, emphasizing Victoria's charitable work, her education at Swiss finishing schools, her family's long history with the city's social elite. Victoria was such a perfect fit for the family, Rebecca said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We all thought she and Marcus would be married by now. But sometimes life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? Elena felt the comment like a slap, but before she could respond, Marcus's voice cut through the conversation with quiet authority. Rebecca, I think that's enough reminiscing for one evening. His sister's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes promised that this conversation was far from over. Elena realized that winning over Marcus's family would be a battle she wasn't prepared for, one that hadn't been covered in their contract. The most awkward moment came when Elena's father approached Marcus during the reception. Carlos Martinez looked frail in his rented tuxedo, but his handshake was firm when he extended his hand to his new son-in-law. Mr. Blackwood, I want to thank you for what you're doing for my family. Marcus's expression became unreadable. Please, call me Marcus. And there's no need to thank me. Elena is. He paused, glancing at her with an expression she couldn't interpret. She's remarkable. I'm the one who should be grateful. Elena felt something flutter in her chest at his words, even though she knew they were likely spoken for her father's benefit. But there had been something in Marcus's voice, a sincerity that hadn't been there when he spoke to the other guests. As the evening wound down, Elena found herself alone with Marcus for the first time since their brief meeting before the ceremony. The last guests had departed, her family had been driven back to their hotel, and the staff was efficiently clearing away the remnants of the celebration. You did well tonight, Marcus said, loosening his tie as they stood in the now-empty ballroom. That story about the coffee shop was quick thinking. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of your friends. These people aren't my friends, he said with a bitter laugh. They're business associates, social obligations, family connections. Very few of them actually like me, and even fewer would be here if I weren't worth several $billion. The cynicism in his voice surprised Elena. She had expected him to be comfortable in this world of wealth and privilege, not detached from it. That sounds lonely, she said before she could stop herself. Marcus looked at her sharply, as if her observation had caught him off guard. Loneliness is a luxury I can't afford. There are too many people depending on the decisions I make. What about what you need? What I need is irrelevant. What matters is what the company needs, what the family legacy requires, what the shareholders expect. He paused, studying her face with those intense blue eyes. But I suppose you understand something about sacrificing personal desires for family obligations. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. This isn't a sacrifice. Your offer saved my father's life. I'll never be able to repay that. It wasn't charity, Elena. Don't romanticize what this is. We both got what we needed from this arrangement. His words stung, even though she knew he was right. This was a business transaction, nothing more. She was foolish to read deeper meaning into a few kind words or a moment of apparent vulnerability. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her professional smile firmly in place. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, I've had your belongings moved to the master suite. Shall I show you the way? Elena felt panic rise in her throat. She had assumed they would have separate bedrooms, as outlined in their contract. The thought of sharing a room, even platonically, felt too intimate for their arrangement. Marcus seemed to read her expression. Margaret, please show Elena to the blue room. I'll be staying in my study tonight to catch up on some work. Relief flooded through Elena, followed immediately by something that might have been disappointment. She told herself it was exhaustion playing tricks with her emotions. The blue room was larger than Elena's entire apartment, decorated in shades of navy and cream with a four-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a palace. Margaret showed her where everything was located, from the walk-in closet to the marble bathroom with its oversized soaking tub. Mr. Blackwood had some things selected for you, Margaret said, indicating the closet. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, we can have alterations made or arrange for new pieces. Elena opened the closet to find it filled with clothes that probably cost more than she had earned in the past year. Designer dresses, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters, shoes from brands she had only seen in magazines. It was overwhelming and generous and somehow impersonal all at once. After Margaret left, Elena sat on the edge of the enormous bed and tried to process what her life had become in the span of a single day. This morning she had been Elena Martinez, struggling waitress from a working-class family. Now she was Elena Blackwood, wife to one of the most powerful men in the country, mistress of a mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. She picked up her phone to call her mother, but realized it was after midnight. Instead, she sent a text. I'm okay. The house is beautiful. We'll call tomorrow. As she prepared for bed in the luxurious bathroom, Elena caught sight of herself in the ornate mirror. The makeup artist's work had held up well, and, in the soft lighting, she almost looked like she belonged in this opulent setting. But, beneath the surface glamour, she could see the uncertainty in her own eyes, the fear of not measuring up to expectations she didn't fully understand. Elena had just settled into the impossibly comfortable bed when she heard a soft knock on the door. Her heart rate spiked as she called out, "Come in." Marcus appeared in the doorway, having changed from his tuxedo into dark jeans and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The casual clothes made him seem more human somehow, less like the intimidating businessman, and more like someone she might actually have met in a coffee shop. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed," he said, staying near the door rather than entering the room fully. "It's perfect. Thank you for the clothes. You didn't have to do that. Margaret handled it. She's efficient with that sort of thing." He paused, running a hand through his dark hair. "Elena, about tomorrow. We should discuss how we want to handle the practical aspects of this arrangement." "Okay. I leave for work early, usually around 6. I'm rarely home before 8 in the evening. You're welcome to explore the house, the grounds, use any of the facilities. There's a library, a gym, a pool. The staff will prepare whatever you'd like for meals." It sounded like he was describing a luxury hotel rather than a home they would share. "What about appearances?" Elena asked. "When do we need to be seen together publicly?" "There are certain social obligations. Charity events, business dinners, family gatherings. Margaret will coordinate with you on scheduling. Other than that, you're free to spend your time however you'd like." Elena nodded, though the arrangement felt impossibly isolating. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" He tensed slightly. "What? Why didn't you just hire an actress? Someone who would be more convincing as your wife?" The question had been bothering her all evening. Surely someone with his resources could have found a more polished woman to play this role. Marcus was quiet for so long that Elena thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had heard it before. "Because actresses are professional liars. Their job is to make people believe things that aren't true. I needed someone who was." He struggled for the right words. "Someone genuine. Someone who couldn't fake emotions even if they tried." Elena felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. "You don't really know me well enough to make that judgment, don't I?" He leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "You wear every emotion on your face, Elena. When you're nervous, when you're angry, when you're trying not to cry. You couldn't lie convincingly if your life depended on it. That's exactly what I needed for this to work. So I'm supposed to be your professional, genuine person?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Something like that. They looked at each other across the dimly lit room, and Elena felt something shift between them. Not attraction exactly, though she couldn't deny that Marcus was one of the most compelling men she had ever encountered. It was more like recognition, as if they were seeing each other clearly for the first time. "Elena," Marcus said quietly, "I want you to understand something. This arrangement, this marriage, it's temporary. In 2 years, you'll be free to build whatever life you want with enough money to make any dream possible. Don't let yourself forget that." The warning was clear, though Elena wasn't sure if he was cautioning her against developing feelings for him or revealing that he might be struggling with the same issue. "Good night, Marcus," she said softly. "Good night, Mrs. Blackwood." 3 weeks into their marriage, Elena had established a routine that helped her navigate the strange new world she found herself inhabiting. She woke early, before Marcus left for work, and shared coffee with him in the morning room while they discussed the day's schedule with Margaret. These brief interactions were always polite, professional, and carefully distant. Marcus would ask if she needed anything. She would assure him she was fine, and then he would disappear into his car and his world of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. Elena spent her mornings exploring the mansion and its grounds, still amazed by the sheer scale of wealth surrounding her. There was a library with first-edition books she was afraid to touch, an art collection that belonged in a museum, and gardens maintained by a staff of 6. In the afternoons, she often visited her father at the hospital, where his treatments were proceeding better than anyone had dared to hope. The experimental therapy Marcus's money had made possible was working. Carlos was growing stronger each day, his color returning, his energy levels increasing. Elena's mother had taken a leave of absence from her cleaning jobs to stay with him, and, for the first time in months, the Martinez family had reason for genuine hope. "You look different, Mija," her father said one afternoon as Elena sat beside his hospital bed. "Sadder, maybe." "I'm not sad, Papa. I'm just adjusting." "And your husband? How are you adjusting to him?" Elena hesitated, unsure how to explain the complex dynamic she had with Marcus. They lived in the same house, but barely saw each other. They were legally married, but strangers in every way that mattered. When they did interact, there were moments of genuine connection that made Elena's pulse race, followed immediately by Marcus's withdrawal into professional politeness. "He's kind," Elena said finally. "And he keeps his promises." Carlos studied her face with the sharp eyes of a father who knew his daughter too well. "Kind is good. But what about love, Elena? Are you happy?" Before Elena could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Emergency at home. Please return immediately." Elena's heart hammered as she kissed her father goodbye and rushed back to the mansion. She found Margaret waiting in the foyer, her usually perfect composure slightly frayed. "What's wrong?" Elena asked. "Mr. Blackwood's ex-fiancée is here. She's in the living room, and she's upset." Elena felt her stomach drop. Victoria Ashford was here, in their home, demanding what exactly? Elena had managed to avoid thinking too much about Marcus's past relationship, but now she was about to come face to face with the woman he had chosen before circumstances forced him to choose her instead. "Does Marcus know she's here?" "He's in meetings all day. I tried calling, but his assistant said he couldn't be disturbed." Elena took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. She might not have been born into this world, but she was Marcus's wife now, and that meant something, even if only legally. Victoria Ashford was everything Elena had expected, and worse. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, and the kind of bone structure that suggested generations of genetic privilege. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than Elena's family's monthly mortgage, and when she turned to face Elena, her green eyes were cold with fury. "So you're the replacement," Victoria said without preamble. "I have to say, Marcus's taste has certainly changed." Elena felt the insult like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm Elena Blackwood. Can I help you with something?" "Oh, how formal." "Yes, you can help me. You can explain how you managed to manipulate Marcus into this ridiculous marriage when everyone knows he was planning to come back to me." "I don't know what you're talking about." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Please, do you really think anyone believes this sudden romance? Marcus and I were together for 3 years. We have history, connections, a real relationship. This thing you have with him is nothing but a legal convenience." Elena realized with growing horror that Victoria knew the truth about their arrangement. Whether she had guessed or somehow learned the details, she clearly understood that this wasn't a love match. "Whatever Marcus and I have is between us," Elena said carefully. "What you have is temporary," Victoria snapped. "Marcus is going through some kind of crisis, rebelling against his family's expectations by marrying beneath himself. But he'll come to his senses eventually, and when he does, he'll remember what it's like to be with a woman who actually belongs in his world." The words hit Elena exactly where Victoria had intended them to. Every insecurity Elena had been trying to suppress came flooding back. She didn't belong here. She was a fraud playing dress-up in a world that would never truly accept her. I think you should leave, Elena managed. I'll leave when I'm ready. This is more my home than yours will ever be. I helped Marcus choose half the furniture in this room. I hosted dinner parties here, planned charity events, supported his business ventures. What exactly do you contribute besides whatever desperate situation led you to accept this arrangement? Elena felt tears threatening and hated herself for showing weakness in front of this woman. But, before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Victoria, what are you doing here? Marcus stood in the doorway, still wearing his business suit, but with his tie loosened and his dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. His expression was carefully controlled, but Elena could see anger simmering beneath the surface. Marcus, darling. Victoria turned toward him with a brilliant smile, as if she hadn't just been verbally eviscerating his wife. I was just getting acquainted with Elena. She's charming. I asked what you're doing here. I wanted to see if the rumors were true. And, I have to say, I'm concerned about you. This isn't like you, Marcus. Marrying someone so inappropriate, so beneath your station. It's almost as if you're trying to punish yourself for something. Elena watched Marcus's face, waiting for him to defend their marriage, to tell Victoria that she was wrong about Elena's place in his life. Instead, his expression became even more shuttered. My marriage is not your concern, isn't it? Marcus, we have history. We love each other. Whatever game you're playing with this girl, it doesn't change what we have together. We don't have anything together. We ended months ago, because of your grandfather's ridiculous will. But now you've solved that problem, haven't you? You can divorce this little nobody and marry someone appropriate. Someone who actually loves you. The casual cruelty in Victoria's voice made Elena flinch, but it was the silence that followed that truly hurt. Marcus said nothing, didn't contradict Victoria's assessment of their marriage or defend Elena's place in his life. Victoria, you need to leave. Now. Marcus's voice was quiet, but carried unmistakable authority. Fine. But, Marcus, when you're tired of this charade, when you remember what it's like to be with an equal rather than a charity case, you know where to find me. Victoria swept from the room with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. Elena stood frozen, feeling exposed and humiliated in ways she hadn't anticipated. Marcus closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. A gesture Elena had learned meant he was either exhausted or deeply frustrated. Elena, I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Victoria can be difficult. Is she right? The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them. About this being temporary? About you planning to go back to her? Marcus's eyes snapped open, and he looked at her with surprise. What? She seemed very confident that this marriage is just a phase for you. Something you'll get tired of once you've secured your inheritance. Victoria doesn't know what she's talking about, doesn't she? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like she knows you better than I do. She knows your taste in furniture, your business strategies, your family's expectations. She belongs here in ways I never will. Elena could hear the pain in her own voice and hated herself for it. This was supposed to be a business arrangement. She wasn't supposed to care about Marcus's feelings for his ex-fiancée or feel jealous of their shared history. Marcus stepped closer, his blue eyes intense. Elena, you can't seriously be comparing yourself to Victoria. Why not? She's everything you chose before circumstances forced you to choose me instead. I didn't choose Victoria. My family chose her. The board of directors chose her. Everyone around me decided she was perfect for my image, my career, my social standing. I went along with it because it seemed easier than fighting. But you loved her. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Elena felt her heart sink. His silence was answer enough. I thought I did, he said finally. But what I felt for Victoria was more like recognition. She fit into my life seamlessly because she was designed to fit. Every conversation we had was scripted, every emotion calculated for maximum social benefit. I was comfortable with her, but I was never challenged by her. And challenging is what you want in a wife. I don't know what I want, Marcus said honestly. I never allowed myself to think beyond duty and obligation. But, Elena, in the 3 weeks you've been here, you've made me question assumptions I've held my entire life. Elena's pulse quickened. What kind of assumptions? That marriage is a business merger. That compatibility is more important than passion, that I'm better off keeping people at a distance. He moved closer still, near enough that Elena could smell his cologne, see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. You make me want things I didn't think I was capable of wanting. The admission hung between them like a challenge. Elena felt her breathing become shallow as she recognized the desire in Marcus's expression, the same attraction she had been fighting since their wedding day. Marcus, this isn't what we agreed to. No, it isn't. His voice was rough, honest. The question is, what do we do about it? Before Elena could answer, his phone rang, cutting through the tension. Marcus glanced at the screen and cursed softly. It's the office. I have to take this. He answered the call, his voice immediately shifting back to business mode. Blackwood here. Elena watched as he paced to the window, discussing what sounded like a crisis with one of their international divisions. The moment of intimacy was broken, replaced by the familiar distance of his professional persona. When he finished the call, Marcus turned back to her with an apologetic expression. I have to go back to the office. There's a situation in Tokyo that requires my immediate attention. Of course. Elena, about what I said. It's fine. We were both upset about Victoria's visit. People say things they don't mean when they're emotional. But, even as she said it, Elena knew that Marcus had meant every word. And, more terrifyingly, she realized that she wanted him to mean it. That evening, Elena sat in the mansion's library, trying to lose herself in a novel but finding her thoughts constantly returning to her conversation with Marcus. His confession that she challenged him, that she made him want things he had never wanted before, echoed in her mind. She was still sitting there at midnight when she heard his car in the driveway. A few minutes later, Marcus appeared in the library doorway, looking exhausted but somehow more relaxed than she had seen him since their wedding. You're up late, he observed. I couldn't sleep. How did things go in Tokyo? Resolved, for now. He moved into the library, loosening his tie as he walked. Elena, about this afternoon. You don't have to explain anything. Yes, I do. What I said about wanting things I've never wanted before. I meant it. But I also know that's not what you signed up for when you agreed to this marriage. Elena set down her book and looked at him directly. What if I told you that I've been thinking the same thing? That this arrangement is becoming more complicated than I expected? Marcus went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that Victoria was wrong about one thing. You're not settling for someone beneath your station. I might not have her pedigree or her connections, but I'm not nobody, Marcus. I'm a woman who's strong enough to sacrifice 2 years of her life for her family, smart enough to navigate your world without losing herself, and brave enough to tell you that this fake marriage is starting to feel real to me. The silence that followed was charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Elena held her breath, waiting for Marcus to respond, knowing that whatever he said next would change the trajectory of their relationship forever. Elena, Marcus said quietly, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. If we cross this line, there's no going back to the way things were. Maybe the way things were wasn't working anyway. Marcus crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Are you sure about this? Because once I touch you, once I kiss you, I won't be able to pretend this is just business anymore. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't look away. Then, maybe it's time to stop pretending. When Marcus kissed her, it was nothing like tea the morning after their first real kiss. Elena woke to find a single red rose on the pillow beside her. There was no note, but she didn't need one. The gesture was Marcus's way of acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted between them the night before. Their relationship evolved quickly after that breakthrough. Marcus began coming home earlier, often finding excuses to spend time in whatever room Elena occupied. They started having dinner together, talking about everything from her childhood in the working-class neighborhoods to his complicated relationship with his family legacy. Elena discovered that beneath his intimidating business persona, Marcus was funny, incredibly well-read, and surprisingly vulnerable when he allowed himself to be. The physical attraction between them was undeniable, but Marcus seemed determined to take things slowly. He would kiss her goodnight at her bedroom door, but never pushed for more, even when Elena's body clearly wanted him to. She appreciated his restraint, but it also left her wondering if he was holding back because he genuinely wanted to be respectful or because some part of him still saw their relationship as temporary. 3 weeks after the library kiss, Elena was getting ready for their first major public appearance as a couple since the wedding. The annual Blackwood Foundation Charity Gala was one of the most prestigious events of the social season, and Elena knew she would be under intense scrutiny from people who were still trying to figure out who she was and why Marcus had chosen her. Margaret had helped Elena select a midnight blue gown that made her skin glow and emphasized her curves in all the right places. As Elena put on the diamond necklace Marcus had given her as an early anniversary gift, she practiced the smile she would need to wear all evening. Confident, but not arrogant. Warm, but not overeager. Marcus appeared in her doorway as she was putting the finishing touches on her makeup, and his sharp intake of breath told her everything she needed to know about how she looked. Elena, He seemed to struggle for words, which made her feel more confident than any elaborate compliment could have. Well, I do. You'll be the most beautiful woman there. His voice was rough with sincerity. But, more importantly, you'll be the most genuine one. Elena stood and smoothed her gown, feeling nervous butterflies dancing in her stomach. What if I say the wrong thing? What if people can tell I don't belong? Marcus stepped into the room and took her hands, his blue eyes serious. You belong wherever you choose to be, Elena. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. The gala was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, in a ballroom that dripped with crystal and gold. Elena had attended charity events before, but nothing on this scale. There were politicians, celebrities, business leaders, and society figures she recognized from magazine covers. The level of wealth on display was staggering. Women wore jewelry worth more than most people's houses, and the men discussed business deals that involved more money than Elena could even conceptualize. Marcus kept her close as they moved through the crowd, his hand resting possessively on her back. Elena noticed how people's demeanor changed when they spoke to him versus when they spoke to her. With Marcus, they were deferential, eager to impress. With Elena, they were politely curious but clearly reserving judgment. So Elena, asked Senator Patricia Morrison during cocktail hour, what's your background? Marcus has been so mysterious about your family. Elena felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but channeled the confidence Marcus had been helping her build. I grew up in the Riverside district. My father was in construction, my mother worked in hospitality. How interesting, the senator said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. And where did you go to school? I studied business at Riverside Community College. Elena didn't mention that she had only completed 1 year before her father's illness forced her to drop out. Community college. How practical. Elena felt the subtle dismissal, but kept her smile in place. She was saved from further interrogation by the arrival of Marcus's business partner, David Whitmore, and his wife Patricia. Marcus, Elena, wonderful to see you both, David said warmly. Elena, Patricia was just telling me how much she enjoyed your conversation at the wedding. She said you have fascinating insights into Neruda's poetry. Elena shot a grateful look at Patricia Whitmore, who winked at her conspiratorially. At least not everyone in Marcus's circle was determined to make her feel unwelcome. The real test came during dinner, when Elena found herself seated between Marcus's sister Rebecca and Victoria Ashford. Elena's heart sank when she saw Victoria's name on the place card, but she reminded herself that running away wasn't an option. Victoria looked stunning in white silk, her blonde hair swept up in a style that emphasized her elegant neck and the massive diamond earrings she wore. She greeted Elena with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Elena, darling, you look lovely. That dress is very affordable looking. Elena felt her cheeks burn but kept her voice level. Thank you. You look beautiful as well. Rebecca leaned in from Elena's other side. Victoria, I was just telling Mother how surprised we all were by Marcus's sudden marriage. It seemed so out of character for him to make such an impulsive decision. Oh, I don't think it was impulsive at all, Victoria said sweetly. I think Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. The question is whether Elena understood what she was getting into. Elena felt like she was being tag-teamed by experts, but she refused to let them see how much their comments affected her. I think I understood perfectly. Did you? Victoria's green eyes glittered with malicious amusement. Because marriage to someone like Marcus requires certain skills. Social graces, political awareness, the ability to represent the family name appropriately. It's not something you can learn overnight. I'm sure Elena will adapt beautifully, Rebecca added with false sweetness. Though I have to admit, we're all curious about how long this phase of Marcus's will last. He's always been drawn to projects. Elena felt something snap inside her. She had been patient with their subtle insults, their attempts to make her feel small and unwelcome. But calling her Marcus's project was a step too far. You know, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly despite its quiet tone. I find it interesting that the two of you seem to know my husband's mind better than he does himself. But, from where I sit, Marcus seems like a man who knows exactly what he wants and isn't afraid to go after it, regardless of what other people think he should want. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. We just worry about him, that's all. Marcus has a tendency to be charitable, sometimes to his own detriment. Charitable, Elena repeated, letting the word hang in the air. Is that what you call it when someone chooses authenticity over artifice? When they value substance over superficial connections? The tension at the table was palpable now. Other guests were starting to notice the undercurrent of hostility, and Elena realized she was in danger of creating exactly the kind of scene she had hoped to avoid. But, before either Victoria or Rebecca could respond, Marcus's voice cut through the awkwardness. Elena, I believe they're starting the auction. Would you like to step outside for some air? Elena gratefully accepted his offer, allowing him to lead her out of the ballroom and onto a terrace that overlooked the city lights. The cool night air felt wonderful against her heated skin. I'm sorry, Elena said immediately. I know I shouldn't have engaged with them, but they were being so bitchy. Marcus supplied with a slight smile. I was going to say unkind, but yes. Marcus moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. You handled them perfectly. Better than perfectly, actually. I've never seen Victoria at a loss for words before. Really. Rebecca too, for that matter. They're used to being able to intimidate people, but you didn't give them the satisfaction. Elena felt a surge of pride at his approval. They really don't like me. They don't like what you represent. Which is... Marcus turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. Change. The possibility that I might actually choose my own life instead of following the script they've written for me. Elena's heart did a little flip at his words. Is that what I represent? Among other things. What are the other things? Marcus moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Passion. Authenticity. The chance to feel something real instead of just going through the motions. When he kissed her under the stars, Elena felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Society expectations and family disapproval be damned. Their romantic moment was interrupted by the sound of Marcus's phone buzzing urgently. He pulled back with a frustrated sigh. I have to take this. It's my assistant. She wouldn't call during the gala unless it was critical. Elena nodded, though she was disappointed by the interruption. Marcus stepped away to take the call, his voice too low for her to make out the words. But his increasingly tense body language told her something serious was happening. When he returned, his face was grim. We need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Someone leaked confidential information about our Tokyo acquisition to the press. The story breaks online in an hour, and if I don't get ahead of it, the entire deal could fall apart. Elena's heart sank. She had been enjoying the gala despite the difficult moments, and, more importantly, she had been looking forward to the intimate celebration Marcus had hinted they might have afterward. But she understood that his business had to come first. Of course. Let's go. The drive home was tense, with Marcus making phone call after phone call to try to contain the damage. Elena sat quietly beside him, watching the city lights blur past, and trying not to feel disappointed about their abbreviated evening. When they reached the mansion, Marcus was immediately swept into crisis mode. His study filled with assistants, lawyers, and board members who had been called in for emergency consultations. Elena changed out of her gala gown and settled into the library with a book, knowing she wouldn't see Marcus again that night. She must have dozed off in her chair, because the next thing she knew, Marcus was gently shaking her shoulder. The house was quiet around them, and pale morning light was filtering through the windows. Elena, wake up. We need to talk. She blinked up at him, noting the exhaustion in his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. Is everything okay? Did you manage to save the deal? The deal is fine, but we have a bigger problem. Marcus handed her his tablet, which was open to a gossip website. These photos were taken last night. Elena's blood turned to ice as she saw herself and Marcus on the terrace, captured in their intimate moment. But these weren't random paparazzi shots. They were too well composed, too perfectly angled. Someone had been specifically photographing them. Who would do this? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Victoria. Marcus's voice was hard with anger. She must have hired a photographer. The pictures came with a message suggesting that our marriage is a sham, that I'm having an affair with my own wife to make the arrangement look more convincing. Elena felt sick. The photos made their private moment look calculated, staged for public consumption. What does this mean? It means Victoria is trying to create doubt about the legitimacy of our marriage. If she can prove it's a business arrangement rather than a real relationship, she might be able to challenge my inheritance on the grounds that I didn't fulfill the terms of my grandfather's will. Can she do that? She can try. And given her family's connections and legal resources, we have to take the threat seriously. Elena stared at the photos, feeling violated and angry in equal measure. She and Marcus had been finding their way towards something real, something beautiful, and Victoria was trying to twist it into something ugly and false. What do we do? Marcus sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. We fight back. We show the world that our marriage is real, that what they're seeing in these photos is genuine emotion between husband and wife. How do we do that? By being ourselves. By not letting Victoria's man up 6 months after their wedding. Elena and Marcus had settled into a rhythm that felt remarkably like a real marriage. They shared breakfast most mornings, talking about their plans for the day. Elena had started volunteering at a literacy center in her old neighborhood, finding purpose in helping other working-class families navigate educational opportunities their children might not otherwise have. Marcus often worked late, but he made an effort to be home for dinner at least 3 nights a week, and they had begun to genuinely enjoy each other's company. The physical aspect of their relationship had progressed naturally. They had moved beyond stolen kisses to sharing more intimate moments, though Marcus still maintained his separate bedroom out of respect for Elena's comfort level. Their attraction was undeniable, but they were building something deeper than just physical chemistry, a foundation of trust, respect, and genuine affection. Victoria's attempts at sabotage had largely backfired. The gossip website photos had been dismissed by most people as evidence of a passionate marriage rather than a fraudulent one. But Victoria hadn't given up. She had been systematically spreading rumors about Elena's background, suggesting that she had somehow manipulated or blackmailed Marcus into marriage. The stories were vague enough to avoid legal action, but persistent enough to create doubt in certain circles. Elena tried to ignore the gossip, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Twice in the past month, she had been confronted by reporters asking intrusive questions about her family's finances, her relationship history, and her motives for marrying Marcus. The attention was taking its toll, and Elena found herself second-guessing every public appearance, every conversation with Marcus's associates. The crisis came to a head on a Tuesday evening in March. Elena was in the kitchen helping the chef prepare Marcus's favorite dinner as a surprise when Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face pale with concern. "Mrs. Blackwood, we need to speak privately." Elena followed Margaret to a quiet corner of the house, her stomach knotting with anxiety. "What's wrong?" "I just received a call from our security team. Victoria Ashford has been seen in your old neighborhood, asking questions about your family. She's been particularly interested in the timing of your father's illness and the sudden improvement in your family's financial situation." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. If Victoria discovered the connection between Carlos's medical bills and Elena's marriage to Marcus, she would have the ammunition she needed to prove their arrangement was fraudulent. "How much does she know?" "We're not sure yet. But, Elena, there's something else. She's arranged for a private investigator to dig into your background. If there are any irregularities in your family's finances, any large deposits that can't be explained." Elena didn't need Margaret to finish the sentence. The $2 million Marcus had paid up front for their arrangement would be impossible to hide if someone was determined to find it. "I have to tell Marcus. He's in back-to-back meetings until 8. But, Elena, you should know that rumors are already starting to circulate. Victoria has been very careful not to make direct accusations, but She's been asking strategic questions at social events. People are starting to wonder. Elena spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the mansion like a caged animal, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. By the time Marcus came home, she was so wound up with anxiety that she practically attacked him the moment he walked through the door. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. Marcus took one look at her face and immediately guided her into his study, closing the door behind them. "What happened?" Elena explained Victoria's investigation, the questions about her family's finances, the growing rumors in their social circle. With each word, Marcus's expression grew darker. "That vindictive bitch," he said when Elena finished. "She's not going to stop until she destroys us. Marcus, if she finds proof that you paid my father's medical bills, if she can show that our marriage was a financial transaction, then we deal with it. We tell the truth." Elena stared at him in shock. "The truth?" "Marcus, the truth is that you bought me. That I married you for money to save my father's life. That's not exactly a romantic love story." "No, it's not." Marcus moved closer to her, his blue eyes intense. "But it's also not the whole story. Yes, our marriage started as a business arrangement. But what we have now is real, Elena. What I feel for you is real." Elena's heart stuttered at his words, but fear overrode the flutter of joy. "It doesn't matter what we feel now. Victoria can prove that our marriage began as a fraud. Your grandfather's will requires a legitimate marriage, not a purchased one." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him working through the implications. If Victoria could prove their arrangement was fraudulent, he could lose his inheritance, his company, everything his family had built over generations. "There's another option," Marcus said finally. "What?" "We could get a divorce. Now, before Victoria can prove anything. You'd keep the money, your father would continue to receive his treatments, and I'd find another way to satisfy the will's requirements." The suggestion hit Elena like a physical blow. "Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant. I won't let Victoria destroy you to get to me. But, Marcus, your company, your inheritance, can go to hell if it means protecting you." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. "You'd give up everything for me." "Elena, in the past 6 months, you've become everything. The company, the money, the social expectations, none of that matters if I lose you." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Elena realized that somewhere along the way, their fake marriage had become the most real thing in either of their lives. "What if we don't have to choose?" Elena said slowly. "What if there's a third option? What are you thinking?" "We fight back. We get ahead of Victoria's investigation by controlling the narrative ourselves. We tell our story, our way, before she can twist it into something ugly." Marcus frowned. "Elena, that's incredibly risky. If we admit to the original arrangement, then we also explain how it evolved. We show people that marriages can grow into love, that sometimes the best relationships start from practical foundations rather than fairy tale romance. You want to go public? Tell the media about our arrangement." Elena took a deep breath, knowing she was about to suggest something that could either save them or destroy them completely. "I want to tell the truth. All of it. The contract, the medical bills, the way we fell in love despite ourselves. We take Victoria's ammunition away by being honest about it before she can use it against us." Marcus stared at her as if she had suggested they burn down the mansion. "Elena, if we do that, there's no going back. Everyone will know that our marriage started as a business transaction. My board of directors, my family, the media, they'll all have that ammunition forever. But they'll also know that it became something real, that you chose love over obligation, that I chose you over financial security." "What do you mean?" Elena's heart hammered as she realized she was about to make the biggest gamble of her life. "I mean, I give the money back, Marcus. All of it. I tear up our contract and marry you again, this time for love instead of money." Marcus went very still. "Elena, you can't give the money back. Your father's treatments will continue because you love me enough to pay for them without requiring anything in return. Not because of a contract, but because you care about my family's well-being. That's a huge risk. If the public doesn't buy our story, if the board decides I'm unfit to run the company because of the original deception, then we'll face those consequences together. As a real married couple who chose each other despite everything trying to keep us apart." Marcus searched her face, looking for any sign of doubt, or hesitation. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we take this step, we can't undo it. Elena thought about the scared young woman who had signed their contract 8 months ago, driven by desperation and love for her father. That woman had been looking for a solution to an impossible problem. But the woman she had become, the woman standing in Marcus's study surrounded by evidence of the life they had built together, was looking for something entirely different. I'm sure. Marcus, I love you. Not your money, not your mansion, not the security you can provide. I love the man who brings me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, who listens to my stories about the kids I tutor, who holds me when I have nightmares about losing my father. That's the man I want to be married to, with or without a contract. Marcus's response was to cross the room in 2 quick strides and kiss her with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. I love you too, Elena. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. So we do this. We tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may. We do this together. The press conference was arranged for the following week. Marcus's PR team was initially horrified by the plan, but they rallied when they realized the alternative was letting Victoria control the narrative. Elena spent hours with media coaches, learning how to present their story in a way that emphasized the romance rather than the business arrangement. The night before the press conference, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of the bedroom she now shared with Marcus, looking out at the city lights and thinking about how much her life had changed since that first desperate phone call about her father's diagnosis. Marcus came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. Second thoughts? He asked softly. No, just processing everything. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be standing in a mansion, married to a billionaire, about to go on national television to talk about our love story, I would have thought they were insane. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be willing to risk everything for a woman I met through a business contract, I would have had them committed. Elena leaned back into his embrace, drawing comfort from his solid presence. What do you think will happen tomorrow? Honestly, I have no idea. The board might fire me. The media might crucify us. Victoria might find new ways to make our lives hell. And you're okay with that? Marcus turned her in his arms, so she was facing him. Elena, I've spent my entire life trying to live up to other people's expectations. Trying to be the perfect son, the perfect CEO, the perfect representation of the Blackwood name. But being with you has taught me that none of that matters if you're not happy. Are you happy? With you? Happier than I've ever been in my life. The press conference the next morning was both terrifying and liberating. Elena and Marcus sat side by side at a table facing dozens of reporters and camera crews, their hands clasped together on the table between them. Marcus spoke first, explaining the terms of his grandfather's will and the pressure he had felt to marry before his 30th birthday. His voice was calm and professional as he described the practical considerations that had led him to arrange a marriage of convenience. Then, Elena took over, talking about her father's illness and the impossible choice she had faced between her family's survival and her own romantic dreams. She spoke honestly about signing the contract, about her fears and doubts, about the loneliness of entering a world where she felt like she didn't belong. But then, their voices softened as they described how their relationship had evolved, how forced proximity had led to genuine friendship, how friendship had grown into attraction, how attraction had blossomed into love. They talked about choosing each other every day, not because of legal obligations, but because they had found in their partnership something neither had expected to find. The truth is, Elena said, looking directly into the cameras, our marriage might have started as a business transaction, but it became the greatest love story of my life. Marcus saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, and I'd like to think I've helped him discover parts of himself he had forgotten existed. Marcus squeezed her hand. Elena saved my father's company by helping me meet the legal requirements of my inheritance. But, more importantly, she saved me from a life of going through the motions without ever truly living. The questions from reporters were tough, sometimes hostile. They wanted to know about the money, about the contract terms, about whether the whole thing was still an elaborate performance for public consumption. But Elena and Marcus answered every question with honesty and dignity, making it clear that whatever their marriage had been, what it was now was real. The public reaction was mixed but largely positive. Social media erupted with hashtags like #LoveGrowsEverywhere and #ContractToLove. Some people criticized them for the deception, but many more were touched by the idea that love could develop from the most unlikely circumstances. Victoria's response was swift and vicious. She went on television that evening, claiming that the press conference was just another layer of manipulation, that Elena was still playing Marcus for his money. But her attacks felt desperate now, lacking the subtle poison that had made her earlier campaign so effective. The real test came at the board meeting the following week. Marcus's directors spent hours questioning him about his judgment, his fitness to lead the company, his ability to separate his personal life from his professional responsibilities. In the end, they voted to retain him as CEO by a narrow margin, swayed partly by the company's strong financial performance and partly by grudging respect for his honesty. Elena's family was initially shocked by the public revelation of their arrangement, but they quickly rallied around the young couple. Carlos Martinez, now in remission thanks to his treatments, gave interviews praising Marcus for his generosity and Elena for her courage. 6 months later, Elena and Marcus renewed their vows in a small ceremony attended only by family and close friends. This time, there were no contracts, no legal arrangements, no ulterior motives. Just two people who had found love in the most unexpected place, choosing each other with their eyes wide open. As Elena walked down the aisle toward Marcus, she thought about the scared young woman who had signed her name to a business contract over a year ago. That woman had been looking for a way to save her father. What she had found instead was a way to save herself. And a love story that proved sometimes the best things in life come from taking the biggest risks. When Marcus kissed her at the altar, this time on the lips and with no reservations, Elena knew that their real marriage was just beginning. They had faced down gossip, family disapproval, business pressure, and their own fears. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together, as partners who had chosen each other not once, but over and over again. Victoria Ashford attended the ceremony as well, having finally accepted that her campaign to win Marcus back had failed. Should elation drive us apart, or make us question what we're building together? Marcus's eyes were intense, serious. But, Elena, I need to know that you're truly committed to this. Not just to the contract, but to us. Because if we're going to convince the world that our marriage is real, it has to actually be real. Elena's heart hammered as she realized what he was asking. He wanted to transition from their business arrangement to an actual marriage, complete with all the emotional risks and rewards that entailed. Marcus, are you saying you want this to be permanent? I'm saying I want the chance to find out if it could be. But only if that's what you want to. Elena looked into his blue eyes and saw vulnerability, hope, and something that looked very much like love. The scared part of her wanted to stick to the safety of their original contract, but the braver part recognized that the best things in life often required taking risks. Yes, she said quietly. I want that chance too. When Marcus kissed her this time, it felt like a promise, a commitment to building something real together despite the obstacles they faced. What neither of them realized was that Victoria Ashford was just getting started in her campaign to destroy their marriage. The photos were only the first salvo in a war that would test everything Elena and Marcus thought they knew about each other, and about the depth of their feelings. But, for now, in the quiet morning light of the library, they had each other and the hope that love might be strong enough to overcome the forces trying to tear them apart. He careful, distant gesture at their wedding ceremony. This kiss was hungry, desperate, full of weeks of suppressed desire and the relief of finally giving in to something they both wanted but had been afraid to acknowledge. Elena melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal passion. This was what had been missing from every interaction they'd had since their wedding. The acknowledgement of the electric attraction that had been sparking between them from the moment they'd met. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything, he whispered. I know, Elena whispered back. But maybe some complications are worth it. As they stood there in the dimly lit library, Elena realized that her carefully constructed walls around her heart had already crumbled. She was falling for her husband, and, based on the way he was looking at her, the feeling might actually be mutual. What Elena didn't know was that outside the library window, a photographer hired by Victoria Ashford was capturing every moment of their intimate encounter. By morning, pictures of Elena and Marcus in a passionate embrace would be on Victoria's desk, along with a plan to use them to destroy the marriage that threatened everything Victoria believed she deserved. The war for Marcus Blackwood's heart was just beginning, and Elena had no idea she was already fighting for more than her marriage. She was fighting for her future. After he left, Elena lay in the darkness of her new bedroom, staring up at a ceiling she couldn't see. The formal way he had said her new name felt like both a gift and a barrier, a reminder of what she was and what she could never really be. Outside her window, she could hear the distant sound of traffic from the city, a familiar noise that reminded her that the world beyond these mansion walls continued to exist. Her real life, her real identity, was still out there somewhere. She just had to make sure she didn't lose track of it in the next 2 years. As sleep finally began to claim her, Elena's last conscious thought was of the way Marcus had looked at her when he said she was remarkable. For just a moment, it had felt like he meant it as more than a performance for her father's benefit. But that was dangerous thinking, and she would have to be more careful about protecting her heart in this arrangement that was supposed to be purely business. What Elena didn't know, as she drifted off to sleep in her gilded cage, was that 3 floors below, Marcus Blackwood sat in his study with an untouched glass of whiskey, trying to understand why the sight of Elena in that wedding dress had affected him so profoundly. He had expected to feel nothing beyond relief that his inheritance was secure. Instead, he found himself replaying every moment of their limited interactions, searching for clues about the woman who had agreed to bind her life to his for reasons that had nothing to do with love. For the first time in years, Marcus found himself genuinely curious about another person. And that, he knew, was going to complicate everything. Elena. Her name sounded different in his deep voice, more substantial somehow. You look. He paused. And, for the first time since this whole arrangement began, Marcus Blackwood seemed at a loss for words. Like I belong here. Elena supplied, knowing the answer was probably no, but needing to break the tension that had filled the room the moment their eyes met. Like you're about to change everything, he said quietly, and Elena realized that perhaps this marriage of convenience was about to become far more complicated than either of them had anticipated.